Yeah.
That's one make istikhara, tahajjud, salat al-tawbah, if one has prayers to make up.
There can be barakah and there can be the Shafi'i madhab, as some of you may know from reading the Reliance of the Travelers, that it's not halal to make any other if you have any fard prayers to make up, you're not supposed to make any other kind of prayers, period. It's not halal to do so. It's not even halal to do anything except make up prayers. In the Shafi'i madhab. And this position, you can't give a fatwa on this position. Because, face it, if you've ever tried to do a lot of rukhsas in a row, by number 16 you can hardly tell the sky from the earth, And so, what's better is when people have a lot of prayers to make up, or if you have a lot of prayers to make up yourself, maybe as a new Muslim somebody told you that it was permissible to wipe on your socks, for example. You didn't know that it was not valid in any madhab. And so off you went and were praying on that basis for several years. So when you wake up and learn something about fiqh, you find that wasn't true. What they told you was lies down the wisecracker line. What can you do? Oh no, you've got all these prayers to make up. Well, you have to make those up. Okay, so but what should one do? If one has prayers to make up, one should get up at night, should get up when other people are making tahajjud, because that's the time when you have himmah to make up prayers, and say them in the briefest manner possible, and make up those missed prayers. Okay, make them up before Fajr, and then make up some after Fajr. Okay, if you have higher himmah than that, add a fard prayer before your fard and after your fard for each prayer. And many people have done it. And speaking about the spiritual path, I had intended to talk about this later. Maybe I'll talk about it tonight a little bit. But we didn't talk about tawbah, the first of the arkan, in great detail. But one of the things is that one's fard prayers are fard after all, and that Allah's dain Allahi ahaq wa yuqda. The debt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a better right to be paid even than other debts. Debts are dangerous things in Islam. Everybody who knows anything knows that we better pay our debts back. Okay? So the hadith has come that the debts to Allah have an even better right, a fortiori right to be paid off. Okay, and one of these is what? Is those fard salats. So everybody who takes the tariq, you've got to figure out how many salats you missed in the bad old days and make them up. Okay. Just like as we mentioned yesterday, the people who ripped people off in the bad old days. For example, you were in a gang and you were the watcher or something, and your buddies used to rip off the stores. For example, you've got to pay all that back. Okay, al-Islamu yujibbu ma qablahu illa al-huquq al-maliyah. The hadith has come that Islam dissevers everything that went before it, but not financial rights. If you ripped off the phone company, if you ripped off the food stamp program, if you ripped off other human beings, if you borrowed books and didn't return them, all of it's got to be paid back. I had somebody who was a tough guy from the West End of London who was just visiting in Jordan, karate man, and he was really, seems like he thought he was a lot tougher before I told him that. He's going, oh no. So, another poor soul, subhanAllah, his spiritual guide told him that it was all right to rip off banks. And I straightened him out on that. Every single human being who you rip off, you have to pay back. That's the bad news. Okay, so everybody, it depends how intense your Jahiliyyah period was. Everybody's got a few things they're not too proud of, but in America, the bolder the rip-off, the better, as far as American culture is concerned. And so anybody who has anything of that nature in their past, get it straightened out before you get trashed in the akhirah, because it's going to hurt. It's going to really hurt. Allah is Ghafur Rahim. Allah forgives, is all forgiving. But the rights of other servants is another matter. Okay, there is a book that Allah will not ignore the slightest bit of, as has come in hadith, in Prophet ﷺ. And this is the book of the rights of your fellow servants. So this is part of Tawbah. Who was it? Khair al-Nasaj, one of the greatest Sufis. I'm not sure if it was him or if it was someone else. Anyway, he was a highwayman. I think it was Khair al-Nasaj. I think that was him. And he was a highwayman, and that's one of the worst crimes that you can commit in Islam. What's the penalty for it is to have your arm and leg cut off from opposite sides. I mean, why? Because he's even more dangerous to the polity than somebody who robs people, an ordinary robber. Why? Because he menaces the lifelines of the community, trade routes, all important lifeblood of the cities. So he was a highwayman, one of the worst people. In other words, he killed people and took everything they had. Okay, and so and robbed others. Maybe he didn't kill them, but he robbed people on the highways. And so he made his tawbah, and I think he was who was it? Somebody he caught somebody, and the person said, it was a little boy, and he says, well, he says, do you have any money on you? And he says, yes. He says, my mother sewed 4 gold coins in my coat. Here it is here, sewn in here. And so he says, well, why are you telling me this? And he says, well, my mother told me, he says, I'm going to seek ilm. I'm going to seek Islamic knowledge in such and such a city. My mother told me that I shouldn't tell any lies. And then he suddenly got very embarrassed. And he said, well, isn't it about time that I start changing? And he said, I'm messing around. This kid is smarter than I am. And so he repented. And then all of his band repented. All of his gang of men repented. And they became Sufis. And they went around to all the cities and shouting out, whoever has any right against khair should come and I'll pay it back. And so his state of affairs is not more unpleasant than your own state of affairs. Okay, now the money that you owe people, if you ripped off people in the past, you can return it by any means, even an anonymous letter. Okay, if they're dead, or if the phone company disincorporated and merged with another corporate giant or something, so it no longer exists, that you can pay them back, then you have to get that money out of your financial resources. You have to spend that money out for like a non-Muslim charity or something. You can't. The money is considered dirty. You can't even give it to a Muslim. You can't feed Muslims with it. For example, you have to give it to pave roads or for the public good. In some, without the intention, however, of charity, but rather of the intention of getting it out of your wealth. So, the good news is that the way to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is open. But the bad news is that you've got to step on your nafs a little bit in order to get to it. And that's one of the first things, is this tawbah. Okay, that's one of the first things. So, what have we mentioned so far? We've mentioned 2 of the very hardest things in the tariq. One, learning a book of fiqh, grabbing a book of fiqh, learning your tahara, and learning your salat, and checking to see if your salats are all straight. Okay, here's another one, for those of you who think you're doing fine, is the people who stand up in their salat and they say, Allahu Akbar, and then their mouth doesn't open anymore, and they just turn over the words of the salat in their heart. Their salat is not valid on any madhab either, and those salats have to be repeated. Okay, so check that out, and check out yourself. See where you stand from the sacred law of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and find out, and get your salat straightened out, and find out if you missed anything. When I became a Muslim, I found that some of the aspects of my prayers, my previous prayers, were not right. They were messed up, and so I had to go back and I had to fix them up. There was one time when I was praying over 120 rak'ahs a day in addition to the ordinary fard. But it passes, and when it does pass, when you get all your salats prayed properly, then it's as though a tremendous weight is lifted off your back, and then the ruh can rise. The ruh can rise. Okay, so tasawwuf is first things first. Okay, as Khair al-Nasar said, kunna lasus wa sirna khusus. Says we used to be thieves, and then we became of the elite. And so we have to, so tasawwuf has two basic things that we have to do in order to follow the way of tasawwuf. The first is taqwa. And the second is tahliya. For those of you who know Arabic, tahliya means clearing the premises, getting rid of the bad things. And tahliya means taking on the good things. Okay. So we have to have those two. So the first rukn, we mentioned the three integrals of tasawwuf, just like the Islam has 5 pillars and Iman has 6 pillars. Tasawwuf has 3 pillars that they commonly distinguish. What are these? They're tawbah is the first one, and zuhud, and tahqiq al-ubudiyya, realizing one's slavehood, inwardly and outwardly, constantly. Okay, so the first of these is tawbah, and if you don't have one of the arkan, you don't have tasawwuf. And so you have to take care of that. Everybody who's taken the tariq from me knows now that they have to take care of the aspect of tawbah. If you have any salats that you missed, by the standards of the Sharia, not by the standards of, well, I have a positive feeling about those salats, but rather, what does the Sharia say? Because Islam is istislam to the Sharia. Islam is submission, surrender to the rules of the Sharia. No.
How do you know if your tawbah is sincere, especially if you're prone to return to an action which is...
Well, the best thing is that you assume that it isn't, and to even make tawbah from your tawbah. Okay. Face it, I don't know, if we look at our works, or say, well, all our wonderful works that we did, when you really understand something about how wonderful they really are, you'll say, oh no, these works should scare us, really. And usually, our hope is that if Allah accepts us, He will turn our bad deeds into good deeds, as has been mentioned in the Quran itself. يُبَدِّلُ سَيِّئَاتِهِمْ حَسَنَاتٍ. Okay, Allah changes their bad deeds into... So all of our acts of obedience, including tawbah, are really bad deeds in comparison to how they should be. And so our only hope is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, we don't depend on our tawbah, we don't say, here I am with my ikhlas, I dare you not to accept my works. You don't say that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, you say, oh Allah, please, dakhilak, please forgive these good works and please forgive these bad works. The sign that a good work has been accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that one no longer notices it. That's the sign that it has been raised up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From our tawbah. That's why Rabia, the great Sufi lady, she used to say, our istighfar yahtaj ila istighfar. Saying astaghfirullah needs to say astaghfirullah for it. Because none of our works are. It's just Allah's grace and Allah's pure generosity that He accepts any of our works. SubhanAllah. Allah. So those are some of the aspects. We don't depend on them. Depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing else is strong enough to depend on. It's the time to head out for the get our transportation going. If there's questions about any of the matters, I don't know. This afternoon's talk about ontology was perhaps a bit. It may have raised some questions, but if you have any questions about anything, then bring them, because things that you're wondering about, probably other people are wondering about too. Probably I'm wondering about. So I'd like to hear the questions and then try to find answers to them.
We'll come back after Salat.
Yeah. Excuse me.
Shaykh, can I ask you a practical question?
Yeah.
Is it true you can say Ya Azizu during every Hisb al-Bahr? Or was it any special times?
It's something that's very special. It's a special, and it's not for most people. There's a. Who's trying to go? Yeah. Shaykh al-Kurdi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he published Zarruq's Sharh Hisb al-Bahr. And at the end of the Sharh, he had a number of, what could you call it? Yeah, special effects for Hisb al-Bahr, that are things that are